Will you please pray with me? Dear Lord, may the words of my mouth and the meditations on all of our hearts be worthy in your sight and in keeping with the teachings of your Son, Jesus Christ, our rock and our Redeemer. Amen. Last week, I talked about how the pandemic has forced us as a society to grieve. So much has changed, and it's caused a lot of people to mourn the normal that we have lost. But I also spoke about how grief can help us move through unpredictable times into a new view of the world. Things that impact society impact everything, from jobs, family, hobbies, relationships, communities. Our loss of what is normal in 2019 affects how all these things work. The church, our church, is no different. We've seen a lot of changes here from the pandemic, even if we don't really realize it. Our worship services are now hybrid services. They are in person, but they are also streamed online. That isn't going away. Our choir hasn't been able to sing in years. When we gather, we aren't allowed to hug, and we have to wear masks. For a little bit more than a half a year, we didn't even gather in person at all. It was just Jenny, Billy, and me, and there was a camera over there. People used to come here every Sunday that either haven't shown up again because they are worried about getting sick, or they replaced their Sunday morning routine with something else. These are all losses that we must grieve too, not as a society, but as a community. Now, some of these things may come back. Obviously, we started in-person worship again. Things that we had before may come back when the pandemic ends. People may return. Familiar things may return in different forms, like online worship did. But there is no guarantee. And I know that that scares some people. So we too, as a church, must grieve what we've lost, or else we may get stuck in that grief. I know that that's easier said than done. A church is built on a legacy, from traditions and missions passed down from generation to generation, spanning sometimes hundreds of years. Around the church, we have pictures of the congregations that we came from. Looking back at the photo albums in the Lucy Woodcock room, we can't help but compare our church to then. Do you know how many times I've heard, look at all the people, look at all the kids. The traditions and legacies have been left to us. And when we naturally compare the two, it can cause us to panic. We feel like we've failed, perhaps, like we need to do better. That panic ultimately leads to rushed decisions, hurt, brokenness, and more fear. Church, more than any other community, has the most history to it, and therefore the most to grieve when things change. We don't want to grieve it because that means that the past is really gone. We all like to imagine that the glory days of the church's past is coming back. If only we get, insert thing here, more kids, more families, if only we get more volunteers. The past we remember is right around the corner. If only we have that secret missing ingredient to make everything better. But that's not how time works. Even if the church gets more members, more families, or more volunteers, the church will look and operate differently than it ever did in the past. It would not be the church that we remember. That means that if we want to keep moving forward, as time does, we need to let go and grieve that past that we've lost. Not to forget it, not to cast it off, but to make sure we aren't stuck in that past. That does not honor the traditions left to us. As Jesus put it, you can't put new wine into old wineskin. So what does it mean to grieve the things that we've lost, specifically in church? It may seem a little contradictory of me, but we grieve by remembering where we came from as we journey on together. I know I just said let go, and now I'm basically saying not to let go, but there's a difference here. Acknowledging where we come from and the faith that draws us all together is different than lingering in the past. Being stuck in the past means expecting things that worked in the past to be the same today as they were a generation ago. This isn't always the case and can leave us feeling hopeless. Instead, our God calls us to make our faith known to each generation. We make it known by applying our faith where it is needed. For us, that's the community of Byron. What the community of Byron needs, one generation, may be completely different from what it needs the next. What the community of Byron needed before the pandemic might be much different than they need after. If we want to continue our ministry, if our mission is going to mean something to the world after COVID, then we need to make sure it meets those needs. We need to be the new wine for the new wineskin. This is our chance, our opportunity to show love in ways that we've never done before, bringing along the lessons and legacies that we carry. Maybe we don't know what exactly is needed yet. Maybe we aren't sure exactly how to meet people's needs yet. The point isn't that we need an answer immediately. It's moving as a church family to meet those needs when we realize they are there. There is going to be a desire to either go back to what was comfortable or to find answers to what we need to do immediately. But friends, God works best during times of uncertainty. When things are unclear, people of faith lean not on their own understanding, but on God to provide. We journey forward into the future with the ending of this pandemic with the help of God. It's always been that way. God got us through the past 2 years, and God will carry us through the next. Like God carried the Israelites out of Egypt, or how God carried the Jews out of Babylon, God will also carry us. We just need to be listening for when God calls us to move. After we grieve our shared losses, we are free to move into a time of newness and meet those new needs. New possibilities open themselves up to us. New visions of how to face our challenges. But the first step is acknowledging what we've lost. Not to cast them aside, but to honor them and to carry them into the next generation. We can do this together with the grace of God and the healing that Jesus Christ brings to each new day and each new opportunity in our lives.